On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
As some of you know, hospitality and welcome are at the top of my list. And when it comes to the way we live together in community, I think it's especially important that we focus on hospitality and welcome. And when extending hospitality to others, one of the best ways to show welcome is by sharing a meal together and spending time in meaningful conversation with others, all kinds of other people. In fact, I really believe that extending hospitality to others by eating together is a vital aspect of what it means to be human. The writer of Luke's gospel understood mealtime hospitality and table fellowship. Luke's gospel contains more mealtime scenes than any of the other gospels. In fact, mealtime experiences and parties were one way in which the writer of Luke described and portrayed a vision of the Christian life and Christian community. In Luke, Jesus is frequently eating, drinking, partying, and participating in table fellowship with all kinds of people. Eating with people from various backgrounds and walks of life was a frequent occurrence for Jesus, whether it was in Emmaus, in an upper room, in the fields along the road as the disciples plucked heads of grain, in a home of the despised tax collector, in the homes of respected religious leaders, or as we see today, in the home of an unnamed Pharisee who offers Jesus hospitality for a Sabbath dinner. The respected social climbing religious Pharisees are watching Jesus very closely and watching his every move. And Jesus has been watching their behavior as well. Having observed how they chose banquet seats and noting how they elbowed themselves into places of honor, Jesus begins to give advice on table fellowship and hospitality, Jesus style. He says, when someone invites you to a dinner, don't take the place of honor. Somebody more important than you might have been invited by the host. Then he'll come and call out in front of everybody, "You're in the wrong place. The place of honor belongs to this man." Red-faced, you'll have to make your way to the very last table, the only place left. When you're invited to a dinner, instead, go and sit at the last place. Then when the host comes, he may very well say, "Friend, come up to the front. That will give the dinner guests something to talk about. What I'm saying is, if you walk around with your nose in the air, you're going to end up flat on your face. But if you're content to be simply yourself, you will become more than yourself. Quoting the book of Proverbs, Jesus advises the hustling guests to not rush to the head of the dining room, but rather sit in a humbler location on the happy chance they should be invited closer to the attractive host. I have to say, Jesus' words would have been very disconcerting and offensive to these guests. They lived in and were the embodiment of an honor-shame culture in which issues of status and recognition were of utmost importance. Jesus' words would have been very humiliating because moving to a lower position would mean a lowering of prestige and social capital. Well, then, to their dismay, this was not all Jesus had to say. There's more to come because Jesus is not done with his critique. After criticizing the group regarding guest etiquette, he daringly turns to the host and gives a lesson in hospitality. Jesus says the next time you put on a dinner, don't just invite your friends and family and rich neighbors, the kind of people who will return the favor. Invite some people who never get invited out, the misfits from the wrong side of the tracks. You will not only be a blessing, you yourself will experience a blessing because your guests won't be able to return the favor. However, the favor will be returned. Oh, how it will be returned at the resurrection of God's people. In this scene, the writer of Luke's gospel inverts traditional cultural banquet etiquette and table fellowship. First, he criticizes the behavior of the prestige-seeking guests. Then he lectures the host about how he should have invited all those they considered the losers in the community. I have to say, Jesus' words and methods were not going to win friends and influence people. Jesus, however, was never a candidate for the Congeniality Award, as much as some people think and desire that he was. As theologian Robert Capon suggests, Jesus is at pains, as he has been all through his final journey to Jerusalem, to set forth death and lostness, not life and success, as the means of salvation. And at this dinner party, he has found himself in the presence of a bunch of certified solid-brassed winners, establishment types who are positive they've got all the right tickets, religious and otherwise, and who think a fun evening consists of clawing your way to the top of the social heap. Therefore, when he addresses them, he is principally concerned to redress the imbalance he feels all around him, the imbalance and the injustice he feels all around him, to assert once again his conviction that a life lived by winning is a losing proposition. My friends, we are people who specialize in winning, and we specialize in bookkeeping. We like to strive to be first, to be important, and to be winners. And we do this by keeping records and keeping score, by focusing on being on top and being front runners, and by constantly juggling accounts in our heads. We are enslaved to our bookkeeping, our ladder climbing, and our scorekeeping. And in the person of Jesus, God has announced that God has once and for all, forever, pensioned off the bookkeeping department. God has, in fact, rejected our bookkeeping. Jesus warns the host and each one of us to not consult the records we keep on people, not the friend-foe ledger, not the rich-poor volume, not the nice, nasty, winners, losers, or good, bad journals and books we keep on people. I have to say, letting go of that is very hard. But as far as God is concerned, that way of doing business is over and done with. As Robert Capon says, it may be our sacred conviction that the only way to keep God happy, the stars in their courses, our children safe, our psyches adjusted, and our neighbors reasonable is to be ready at every moment to have the books we have kept on ourselves and others audited. But that is not God's conviction, because God has taken away the handwriting that was against us. In Jesus' death and resurrection, God has declared that he is not the least interested in examining anybody's books ever again, not even God's own. He's nailed them all to the cross. Jesus is saying to each one of us, listen, you are mired in scorekeeping lives. You are so busy trying to hold the world together by getting your accounts straight that you hardly have time to notice that it's falling apart faster than ever. Why don't you just let go? Why don't you just let that die? Thumb your nose at the ledger. Drop dead to the accounting. Because it's not just one more thing that can't save you. It's the flypaper that catches everything else that can't save you and leaves you stuck with it forever. Look, I'm on my way to Jerusalem to die so you can be saved, free for nothing. I'm going up there to give you a dramatic demonstration of shutting up once and for all the subject of divine bookkeeping. What's the point then of your keeping records when I'm not? Yes, mealtime experiences and parties were the one way in which the writer of Luke described and portrayed a vision of the Christian life. And the banquet is a symbol of the reign of God. This banquet is a symbol of the reign of God. Table fellowship becomes a metaphor for the kingdom of God. Any kind of table fellowship becomes a metaphor for the kingdom of God, where social boundaries and unjust divisions in human community no longer exist. Jesus embodies radical hospitality. Jesus invites us to stop the bookkeeping and let go of all the imposed boundaries and distinctions we try to create. Jesus invites us to be the community of God's people we are called to be. Jesus' words reach across boundaries of place and time and call us to bear witness to the fellowship that exists between God and all of humanity. Not just some, all. Jesus' words call us to let go of our scorekeeping and live into the joy and freedom of fellowship with God and all others. Such fellowship is all about grace, the grace and love in which God holds not only us, but all people, even the entire cosmos. That is table fellowship, Jesus style. Amen.
touch the belt.
What?
Just don't touch the actual brass part.
Oh, man, I was
Unless you want
going
to.
to.
Well, then you get to polish them all.
F5, I think I saw that somewhere. These all three in one?
No, there's another case.